Great. So this is a Gompa recording, November the 26th, 2023, and we're talking about therapy in relation to personal practice, to meditation practice, to other practices and methods. It's interesting. It's a topic that comes up a lot in the Discord discussions, in practice labs, in community hangouts. There are a lot of questions around how does my meditation, how does my opening awareness practice fit with therapy? Should I do therapy at the same time? Should I practice at the same time? What do I choose? And then there are questions around how does therapy fit with Vajrayana? What are the differences? What are we not talking about there? And is it more compatible maybe with certain paths or vehicles in Vajrayana? Maybe some practices are very compatible and others are really pretty distinct and leading in different places. Anyone have a thought about that or some experience to bring that you could kick us off with?
The sense that I got was that it to me almost felt like another method, like an auxiliary method within that is available within whatever view you want to hold. But I also recognize that in having read about the literature of therapies, that a lot of these self-sustaining therapies are more contemporary. And like if the further you go back, I think the more it becomes rooted in this very like practitioner treats the person. But with, in the 80s and 90s, there started to be things like IFS and core transformation, which are somewhat rooted in a almost like a Buddhist perspective, and in some cases explicitly a Buddhist perspective. And yeah, it was really those that I spent a lot of time with and felt like I internalized for my own practice, at least.
And you were saying that those were, for you, that they felt more compatible than maybe some older types of psychotherapy, like Freudian psychoanalysis.
Yeah. I'm not a fan of. I mean, I haven't explicitly encountered. I've only read about it, so it's hard to say. But in general, I have not been too enamored with that. But I found it's really. I have gotten so much out of engaging with some of these therapeutic practices, and sometimes the line really is quite thin between like therapeutic modality and like Buddhist practice. It's like it's bled over into the bled over. It's like seeped into and wonderfully combined with the different the different other types of practices that I've been introduced to in a Vajrayana context.
I think I like bleeding over. It's kind of got a tantric feel to it, hasn't it? I saw a lot of people nodding there. Yeah, carry on.
Yeah, I'm I'm really interested in the bleed over too, and I don't even know if therapy is like the angle that I'm thinking of, but I've been really influenced by Andrew's posts, some of the stuff about focusing. And so then like my broad frame is not so much like therapy and practice, but like healing or like engaging with the content of your stories versus just like full on opening awareness, letting it be, seeing the stories, but not really trying to understand them. And I just kind of like, I'm always going back and forth between that. There are times when it feels like engaging with the story unlocks something that allows me to go deeper and be like, oh, I was ignoring that. And until I could like rationally explain it to myself, I didn't see that. And then there's something in opening awareness that lets me hold that and not want to be like, okay, now let me explain how that readjusts my entire 40 years of existence. Like I don't go in that way, but it feels like going back and forth, making some space, and then like it's almost like puzzle pieces, like fitting some more puzzle pieces together. It's like, oh, now I see it differently.
So I hear you saying something about the relationship between opening awareness and using narrative as a way to gain more understanding can actually be quite compatible there. if you find space in your practice, then you can have a different relationship with the story, the narrative, and then you can bring a different perspective, and then in a different context, go and look in the story and find a different meaning or a different relationship from that. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so, for sure. And prior to doing opening awareness, I think when I was in therapy briefly, it was like a kind of lock and key metaphor in my head. Like, if I find the right key, then everything will unlock and all this shit will be fixed. I won't be running these patterns or these neurotic things. And I think now with opening awareness, I have like a different metaphor of like, if I put the puzzle pieces together right, then I can just let it go.
Mm.
So it's not so much that it will disappear, but like it will still be there, but I can just like let it go.
Mm. Mm. Again, lots of people nodding here. There's something really interesting about the relationship with the narrative, and not all therapy is wanting to only stick with the story, only stick with the narrative as well. There are many therapies that want to explore underneath or go into a somatic domain or find what the narrative is doing in a more meta way. So that's an interesting line of thought. I'm doing this course at the moment that is a Keegan adult stage development course that is related to coaching practice. And one of the things they're really keen on in that is seeing the narrative and asking questions that eventually push through the narrative to your sense-making structure. So there's the holding framework is the assumption that there's a sense-making structure behind everybody's narrative, and understanding what that is a way that you can actually really be with a person in a different way to just hearing the story and then commenting on the story. And we've got a lot of hands up here. Brandon, I think you were first there.
I wanted to jump in because it connects to what was just being shared here. I guess there's a couple different threads to it, but so I'm in therapy right now, so this is a very fresh topic for me. I've got a lot of interest in it. Technically, I'm in psychoanalysis, but we do a lot of body-based work, as you've just described. So a couple of weeks ago, like I brought in an experience that was causing me a lot of sort of, let's call it emotional turmoil. And the night before, I felt myself starting to sort of go into this sort of shut down, sort of depressive place. And I was like, okay, I'm going to sort of stick to my schedule here and not give into this. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to meditate like I do at the end of every night. And so I did. And during that, a lot of joy came up. As soon as I sat down, there was just sort of this big feeling of joy, and these feelings started to dissipate. And it felt like I had sort of dodged a bullet, afterwards. I was like, oh, I feel better. This problem feels less sticky. But the next day when I was talking about it in therapy, I was getting pretty animated and pretty worked up about the original problem. And my therapist was like, let's take a pause and look at how you're reacting right now. He's like, you're still really clearly activated by this situation that came up. And he was like, I kind of want to pause here and look at the fact that you went to meditate. Because he was like, I sort of see this and I have this concern with using meditation as a way to get around your experience and get around what's going on. And it sort of has started me on this path of like thinking, have I ever really done opening awareness right? Like, it's not that I have an answer here one way or the other, but it just sort of got me on this theme. And I think about it a lot now, like in the past several weeks, it keeps coming up. And so he was like, let's just stop and check in, like, what's going on in your body? And so we paused, and, he kind of made me just sit with all this uncomfortable gunk that was moving. And he was like, do any words or images come up for you? And some words came up, and we moved on from there. And the session just felt incredibly productive and I would say liberating, like both somatically, emotionally, conceptually, and there was literally more energy in the body after the session.
Sounds wonderful.
It was good. Yeah.
Good.
I feel like I lucked out with this guy because he doesn't advertise himself as doing somatic work or parts work. He's just like, I do Jungian psychoanalysis. But most of the time he doesn't let me talk. He's like, you're narrativizing. He's like, what's happening in your body right now? Describe that. But for me, this tension between this sort of meditative spaciousness we can get into that holds all of this experience versus these sort of somatic, imaginal, sort of like just sitting with the feeling and seeing where the feeling moves. I don't think these are incompatible, but I'm thinking about the way these two things interact.
Yeah, I was struck by the comment about where the therapist said, could you put the query, could you be using meditation to bypass? And that's an interesting and an important query.
Let's stick on this question. How would you know? What might be the ways that you would, what would be the signs, or what would be a little bit of a red flag around, oh, I'm doing a bit of bypassing here, getting away from,
For me, I pay attention to dreams, like what's popping up in my dream world. If there's a lot of like adversarial characters in there that I'm like in struggle with, then to me that's a pointer, like, oh, there are emotional energies running in me that I am not kind of acknowledging or let's see, what's the right word? I'm not allowing those energies to surface, so therefore they're trying to push up to get my attention.
Conventional psychiatry and psychology has a list of symptoms, behavioral symptoms, which are an attempt to categorize the ways that people show up. And then, I mean, there's the whole normative aspect around diagnoses and normal, not normal, all that stuff, but an attempt to look at what goes on in people's lives that is an expression of their unhappiness. So if your practice isn't over time gradually leading you toward more happiness, effectiveness, contentment, then the query's up. Am I bypassing?